Welcome very, very much to the Conversations Now. We're having a conversation that is a follow-up to one that we did a couple of months ago with Margaret Borges, and we had very important feedback from the audience how well she did in that program, talking about the situation in terms of the queuing off the situation that happened back in 2005, 2008 on the economy, with the real estate interests that played such a role in that, and her take on that she had become very familiar with. And then she continues to be interested in the human condition. And we're going to continue on this series, part 2, talking about the human condition off that introduction that was done on part 1 a couple of months ago. And Margaret, welcome so much to Conversations again.
Thank you, Harold. Again, it is a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, dear. And am I correct? There was a book that was very important talking about the negative, with a negative view of it, of what happened in the in the debacle with the stock market and the real estate market in 2005 and 2008. You paid a lot of attention to that, did you not? And it was also of some of your own personal experience out of California that made you aware of the implications of the real estate market itself, right?
Well, the crash of 2008. The crash of 2008 came as a surprise to the common man, and the buildup was slow. But when everything crashed, it only took basically a year and a half, 2007 to 2008.
That's when it, yeah.
And this is when people were losing their homes for their inability to pay their mortgages. Historically, it's almost 10 years old.
Yeah. Time goes by fast, yeah. Right. But there was a great deal of pain that was the result for a whole lot of people, whereas it seems the people who may have been responsible for that was outlined in that book you had read, that it had been largely the greed, if that's the right term, or the lack of vision of our economic leadership that led to the problem, if I'm not mistaken. And yet the people who suffered most from that were some of the common people who actually lost their homes that is so important to them.
Harold, I don't know if it was what you would call national economic policy, because that is something that changes every 4 years.
Yes, well, that's true, yeah.
With a new election.
Yeah.
The goals of the banking industry are pretty set day to day, month to month, year to year. And their goals remain basically the same. A bank is in business not to help people save money, but for the banks themselves to make money.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And if you should have such a thing as a banking industry that had no interest for gain or for payment.
You mean no interest in terms of a percentage interest on a loan or something like that? Or do you mean just interest in the process itself?
No percentages, an interest-free type of financial system.
Has this been proposed by some and so forth? Or
it
what?
Wouldn't work.
Okay, go on.
Because the banks then would not make money. There would be no real reason to let somebody use your money if you didn't gain proportionately from it.
And the banks do perform an important function in the operation of an economy, right?
Yes. They they would like the people to think that they're doing them a favor, but in actuality, we're doing them the favor by operating in the type of systemic way that banks
do
set themselves up for borrowing, for lending, for minimizing their own risks, for capitalizing on new financial instruments, by taking risks. When a bank doesn't take a risk, it will basically start losing money.
Well, yeah, or
And that's not
yeah.
how they want to do it.
Yeah, and they want to know how to be able to reduce risk to the greatest degree possible, and so would the people who are taking the loan want to want to avoid the risk to the degree possible. Unfortunately, often the greatest returns come from the greatest risk. Very often, as a model, right?
You've covered your mic.
You've covered it there. Oh, the mic.
You must cover your mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very.
Yeah.
After the 2008 crash, interest rates went this way, that way, and the other. And you had really no place to put your investments, i.e. in a savings account, because the interests were so low. They were, 0.0 something, less than 1%.
Why were they so low?
Banks weren't lending, and they weren't taking any risks. They were just sort of in a holding pattern, waiting for the debris to clear, for the lawsuits, for the federal lawsuits. When the federal government took all the big banks in that had caused this crash.
The big banks caused the crash, you say? And the political leaders that were in league with the big banks, or the established interest in the society in general?
It was basically the banks themselves.
Okay.
It went across national lines, but banks do.
Yeah.
But the federal government settled the lawsuit with these big banks. Well, they were listed about 28 or so banks, and they all were charged with paying back each of the people they harmed that were mortgage holders a certain damage amount for the loans. I even got a check on my small mortgage, and the mortgage was only $200,000. So they sent me a check for $300 as compensation for the harm that they had given me.
Okay.
Well, $300 doesn't amount to terribly much, but it did across the the whole spectrum of the loans. It costs billions of dollars to pay back some of the damages. But that's not where the damage came. The damage came from the interruption of lives in terms of lost property, lost jobs, the construction industry falling down, which means you're going to lay off workers, people that had no more money to invest in homes. They couldn't get mortgages. The requirements for getting a mortgage changed, so it wasn't so easy. The lenders weren't lending money. Things were pretty much at a stop for a long time.
Does this periodically go on in terms of the way the nation works, or the economy of a nation works?
Well, I, not being an economist nor a financier or policymaker, but you look back in history and you can see the cycles of the banking industry expanding too far in one direction and then falling on its face.
Yeah.
The
boom and bust, I think they call it, right? Or
right. But I have to ask myself,
yes,
why do they go in such unprecedented, callousness? Because they know their history of boom and bust.
Yeah.
They know it's going to happen again.
Right.
Why do they put themselves? It's as if they haven't learned from before.
Does that include the political class that have some say in what goes on in the economic realm?
Well, every 4 years there's a new, policy of economic.
Well, there's a new person that voted into the presidency and so forth. You say,
right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. In this last presidential election with Mrs. Clinton versus Mr. Trump, the ultimate battle, you had a lot of people that were confused about their platforms. They weren't really quite sure what Hillary's platform was. And then you have a candidate, Mr. Trump, who is totally inexperienced in public political office.
Right, it's a different thing than in the market that he was used to, yeah.
And so you have a businessman who says he's going to make America great again. He is going to reinstill the faith in our economy. We are going to grow, put people into work. And he's inaugurated. He comes with his agenda. And people are sitting in front of their televisions at night, shaking their heads.
Trying to understand what he's
trying
about.
to understand where he's coming from.
Well, that's where we are now as a nation, don't you think?
And
yeah.
he says, no, I am not a politician. I am a businessman.
That's
and
right.
you can see how successful I have made my business.
Yeah, is that a good gauge of a good politician? Is a person who is a good businessman? Is that part of the formula for a good administration? Is to be a good businessman and make bargaining agreements that are for the benefit of the people you represent? Part of it, yeah, but not the whole.
When I look at a politician's modus operandi and I look at a CEO's modus operandi, or in particular, an individual who owns his own company,
Yeah.
you have two very different ways of approaching problem solving.
Talk about it, yeah.
And with an individual who has their own business, they are used to calling the shots.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to have collective bargaining, collective reasoning, or even so many departmental heads that have input into a decision that's going to be made by the chief executive.
Mm-hmm.
You have a person who's going to do the best for his company, regardless of anybody else outside his company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas the government, particularly a federal government, has to look after a federal government, the states, and his own country's interests in the global affairs among nations. So a politician at the top has to take responsibility for the actions of his departmental heads that he votes into office. And say a businessman can go around and say, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, if he doesn't like how they're conducting the business within his own business.
Mm-hmm.
In the federal government, yes, you can appoint your secretaries, your undersecretaries, et cetera, because they're not voted in. They're appointed by the president.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in a sense, when you're also heading a department, say whether it's HUD or the State Department, or whichever department it is, it's not easy just to fire somebody here, there, and the other one, because there's so much involved with opinions, judgments, positioning your own policy so that your team works for the benefit of the government and the country.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's a joke to go around, appointing somebody 1 month and then firing them in the next month with some sort of excuse.
That can happen in the
even
private sector easier than it can in the government. Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, right. And then also he was very adept at using the media, Mr. Trump. I mean, he used these tweets and so forth, and he bypassed the normal media to get at a particular base of people who were his support that were ultimately able to get him elected into office. So he was a very effective practitioner of or use of the media. in a very up-to-date kind of way that some of the younger people might represent. It's called social media, and he knows how to use it to good advantage, or did know how. So I guess that's part of the political charisma that is part of the whole game, yeah.
One thing I like to have in my government is some sort of stability, not only of the goals in mind, but the implementation of the different departments that will work together to make a smooth running government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you have the chaos of firing this, firing that, you're asking yourself, who's on first, what's on second?
Yeah, right. There's a lot of people doing that right now, yeah, as we talk.
And
yeah.
with that, psychologically, you get a type of anxiety that, well, I'm going to wake up this morning and
it's all going to be different, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
how do I address the envelope this morning?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And in my own consciousness, I'm asking, what am I not seeing?
I think a lot of people are asking that as well, don't you think? There seems to be a great deal of discontent, general angst or discontent with the way things are abroad in the nation and in the world, for that matter.
Actually, I don't know. I can't figure out how things are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, the president comes in, and within 2 months, he's dismissing the head of the FBI.
Yeah.
And then he's embroiled for some reason that is suspect as to why he fired him in the first place. Was it to protect his own position?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or was it for a greater good? Or all of a sudden you get whispers and scandals, well, the Russians were in on the election. Hello, Hillary Clinton's got suspicious emails. We should check into that. What's the difference between an email and a Twitter? It's all on a communication machine.
Well, that's true. It's all communication, yeah.
That can be what you call eavesdropped on.
Yeah, right, increasingly, yeah.
So the privacy among the commander-in-chief to his department heads and to his other heads, well, I'm just simply confused.
Yeah, well, so is many of the people. Also, worth mentioning, you did have, coming from Los Angeles, where you were born and raised, you worked with your dad in his law office. We spoke in the last program. But also, you were interested in the United Nations, and you worked at the United Nations. So some of these lessons, you had a sense of the mission, association with the mission as announced or part of its formation of the United Nations, which has governmental governing authority or governing position in the world. So that and you're also very much a person who respects the rights of animals. I can attest for that, having known you for some while, you know.
Working with the United Nations was, of course, an eye-opening situation to watch countries and their governments come together in a neutral situation to try to get something done.
Yeah. That's another layer, yeah, right.
And one of the greatest things the UN has done is to allow this information to come forward. Whether it's acted upon or whether it can be enforced, that's different questions.
Yeah.
But the ability for it to produce documentations of knowledge and opinions from so many different countries, it's a real boon to how the world can be seen. It's not to say that the UN is up there trying to, ferret out secrets from different nations or such, but the legitimacy of their concerns are absolutely I just wish they could do more with the information that they gather.
Do you think things you learned at the UN informs your understanding of the operation of the national political scene?
Not
Did you learn things from them that were relevant to your understanding better the national political context, or not? Or how do they relate the two in your own mind?
Well, let us say that the United Nations is a group of sovereign nations and observers coming together to express their opinions. But
Go on, it's okay now.
But above all else, they are there to serve their country.
Yeah.
And their country is being, and the country is serving itself in all aspects.
Mm-hmm.
So that those people who are appointed to the government, elected or whatever, and then they send their representatives, they're all there for their own self-serving purposes, not simply to do the manifold best for the world as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
They try to
Mm-hmm.
for the best, for the human rights, and for each sovereign nation. But self-interest gets in the way.
Well, what
I have a perfect
yeah.
example
Yeah, please, go ahead.
of this that shows not only the concerns of the nations, but the discrepancies of and the power that each nation can bring to the table at the United Nations. And it's very, very different. For instance, in 1980, I was working on a conference called the Law of the Sea.
Yes, I remember
And it
time.
was extremely important,
Magnesium.
magnesium geodes.
Yeah, geos in the ocean. Yeah, it was a. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But the Law of the Sea was there. They were conferring with nations, particularly nations that were not not part of the oceans of the world. They're landlocked.
Mm-hmm.
Now, every country has their territorial rights in terms of the oceans. You have a coastal amount of distance that you cannot penetrate, otherwise you'll be in the coastal waters of the nations.
Yeah.
But beyond those coastal waters, you have open ocean.
Yeah.
Now, the ocean has vast ground underneath all that water.
Mm-hmm.
And on the ground, there's all sorts of things.
Resources. Yeah.
Resources,
Yeah.
minerals, deposits of such things as oil. And in the case of the Law of the Sea, they were discussing something called magnesium geodes,
Yeah.
which is a very large stone that has to be gathered. And the seabeds are filled with it. However, they're only accessible by the highest of maritime technology.
Bathyscopes and so. Yeah.
No, you need maritime pickers,
Yeah.
basically, which requires large investments in shipping, equipment, technology, in order to what you would call farm the minerals from the ocean bottoms
Okay.
that are very deep
Yeah.
in some places, shallow in other places, but they're in the open ocean.
Beyond territorial,
Beyond the
right,
territorial
international waters,
limits.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
That's
the
an
big
interesting
the big
metaphor,
question
yeah.
of this conference was who owns the treasures of the ocean beyond the territorial boundaries.
How did they work that out? Are there any lessons for the nation state people who are responsible for policy?
Well, of course,
from
the
from
question
sea
about who
negotiation?
owns the treasures or the mineral resources of the ocean was very clear to the industrial nations because they had the wherewithal and the money to be able to farm the minerals.
Right.
However, it's open territory. Now, the big question was, although there's only so few nations of maritime ability and technical ability that can farm these geodes that are very valuable to technology, should the profits of them not be shared among all nations because the ocean floor is global?
Boy, the metaphors with the human condition come streamingly into my mind. About so many metaphors about that situation have relevancy to the larger human condition.
The landlocked countries, the poor countries, the non-industrial countries,
and how
who could all profit from a share of the profit of mining magnesium.
And how's decided who's doing what for whom and by what cost and at what risk, and all of these kind of issues are inherent not only internationally but also nationally, and even on a local level politically.
Well, Harold,
and the relationship between the governmental and the private sector is something that's really important to the issue, and those all came up in 2008 and so forth, and they were all interrelated. Big change,
A small little story or analogy is about the farmer whose crop came in nicely, and his wife is making the pie at the dinner table because they have the wheat and they have the vegetables. They have a stove, they have the fire, and they're able to produce this pie. Now, his neighbor doesn't have that.
Right, okay.
So should he be obligated to share that pie? Or should he, in his conscience or the morality of the community, be obligated to share that pie?
Another magnificent metaphor for the human condition between the political leaders and the people.
Or should that farmer say, I'm sorry, I worked hard for my fields and you didn't, therefore I'm not going to share my pie?
A lot of these kind of issues are there, and don't you think there's an awful lot of general discontent, angst loose in the world now about the political and economic condition in which they find just inordinately high sense of discontent, not discontent, disquietude about the situation inordinately high now around the world.
Again, I ask, who's on first and what's on second? When I read the newspapers
or look at television,
I only see what the producers are giving me.
But you can read behind the lines from some of your experience and your reading and so forth, right?
If you've trained yourself or have the curiosity to go beyond just the word that you read, you can pick up this thing, that, and the other. What's obvious, what's not obvious, what is mentioned one week and not mentioned the next week. Is the news old, or did they put a cap on the story because it was too sensitive?
And what's your overall reading of the thing? How is the do you agree with the idea that there's a great deal of dis-ease among the world population now?
Very much so.
Yeah, why? What's the major source of the creation of this sense of disease among the peoples of the world, including those here in the United States?
The discontentedness, the anxiety.
Lack of faith in leadership, or a lack of effective leadership by the political and or economic leaders of the world. They did fail everything in 2008. There was a gigantic failure of government and the whole process that was very disquieting. People thought we might be on the edge of a Great Depression or something coming out of the inadequacy of the understanding of the leadership. What about now? There's a great deal of animosity between the parties, the political parties, and so forth.
One question that came to me over and over and over again as I was exploring the tragedies of the crash of 2008 was, to what degree was this concocted?
Oh, consciously, you mean?
Consciously.
Yeah, right, okay, well.
To what degree did they create a fall? For instance, when you've had years, say 8 years, of easy money being lent to peoples who could not have borrowed money before because of the conditions set forth in order to borrow money, then you have a change in attitude where this is the golden days. I'm going to, reap from it. We're going to take advantage of it. It's not going to stop. The banks are smarter to allow us to borrow money. Blah blah blah. And so, it's a sucker game.
Sucker or soccer? It's
sucker.
Yeah.
This is a sucker game.
Okay.
This is free money. Oh, little girl, try this drug. It's free, and you'll enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Borrow this much money, and later you can refinance and borrow some more money based on your property that's getting more valuable as the years go on. And so people begin to anticipate that the good times will continue.
Last forever, yeah.
Where the little girl that takes the drug all of a sudden needs that drug. It's no longer a choice. And
well, that boosts sales, huh?
Sales.
Profits
and
for the company, yeah.
It's the same way with mortgages. They made mortgages so readily available, they egg people on. Try and buy your first home, then you can buy a second home. The money's here, blah, blah, blah. But there's always the insidious underpinnings of things you don't take into consideration.
Like,
for instance, you have to pay back your loan.
Yeah.
So if circumstances in your life should change, i.e., you can't sell your house or you can't refinance it because it didn't go up in value, it went down in value. So you're left hanging with a house that you have a loan for $500,000 and it decreased in value because of circumstances down to half its value.
Does that happen often, or is that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that can happen. Okay, go on.
And neighborhoods can be totally destroyed.
Yeah.
If, for instance, a community is dependent on an industry that's in the town. If that industry should close, you're out of business.
Yeah. Well,
The town is out of business. The city's out of business.
Yeah.
I remember in Los Angeles, when I was working with my father in the real estate business, back in 1960s, when the space program started really taking off, and you had in California the large Air Force base called Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was out in the Mojave Desert.
Right.
The shuttles would come down there, and if you've ever been to the Mojave Desert, it's a very large desert, and there's a whole lot of nothing there.
Yeah.
However, when you have a big industrial complex like a United States Air Force Base with a space program, you're going to get all of a sudden an influx of peoples that need homes, that need stores, et cetera, et cetera.
Systems, roads,
the whole community situation. So what happened? Real estate speculators started coming into the Mojave. They'd buy up land, divide it and divide it and divide it, so that you divide a 40-acre parcel of land into,
it's subdividing.
You'd subdivide just raw desert land. You put up a few roads here. You say this is the new site for such and such over here. And people were wanting to get in on the ground floor,
People
i.e.
would like to get in on the ground floor to where things are going to be better in the future for them. Yeah,
Right.
that's what investment is about, I guess. Yeah.
And it was fast and furious.
Yeah, yeah.
And people were buying, 10 acres of land for a couple $100.
Yeah.
And they'd be paying, their monthly payment would be, what, $4.35 a month
Yeah. Yeah.
at such a low interest rate.
Yeah.
They'd be paying that for ages.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened to Edwards Air Force Base?
Did it close? I don't know.
It closed down.
Did it really? Okay.
They changed the shuttle program and moved it to a different place.
Uh-huh.
And
At the
basically,
whim of the federal government, yeah. Uh-huh.
and that can happen. A
Yeah,
factory
right,
can be
yeah,
taken out,
Right.
an Air Force, a military base, anything that is there for the individual to get employment, and with employment, the ability to buy homes,
Bread,
food,
yeah,
clothing,
yeah, right.
and schools.
Yeah.
But when the industry collapses, like Detroit,
Detroit
Flint.
is a sad case, yeah. They
Yeah.
used to be I was raised in Detroit as a young man, and that was the booming. They came out of the Second World War, Willow Run, all those machines, all
Sure.
those machines of war in Europe. They were being done at Willow Run in there, and then they had an automobile industry and all that. So they had a boom period, yeah,
but what you
out of
had,
the Second War.
what you
yeah.
had in Michigan was an already pre-existing assembly line.
Yeah, right.
You
Mr.
had the
Ford.
labor forces, and you had the raw materials.
Yeah, Masabi and all that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
You had also
Coal.
the egress out of the St. Lawrence.
Yep.
You had railroads.
Yeah, well, these are all locational things that are
And it was
relevant,
right
yeah.
in the middle of the country, so that if there should be threats from overseas,
You could
they'd
be
have
good.
to go way into the country in order
Yeah.
to do something to it.
So all of these things are part of a national pattern and everything like that, and they come and go, and they rise with the situation, and there's influences from around the world and everything. So why is it that with all the resources we have, and the population now in the world, what is it, about 7 billion people, and all kinds of capabilities, technological capability, information technology, why is it that there's this sense, it seems to me, I may be wrong, but it seems to be reporting, of great disquietude on the part of the American and world citizenry about the state of affairs on this planet? I mean, do you think that's the case? Seems to me it is. An inordinately widespread sense of dis-ease with the way things are. And
I see
does
it-
any of it come out of the failure of the capitalist system that was exhibited and not reformed or not made whole or healthy? The answer to what happened in 2005 and so forth was something that just took care of the overwhelming needs of the very well-established interests that were there, but did not have anything that served the interest of the mass of the people in any kind of systemic way to ward off the worst effects of what can happen. They didn't come up with a solution that seemed to have legs, as they would say, and it's still lacking some sort of a policy or some sort of an understanding that was relevant to what the future from that point required. And for that reason, there's still anxiety at a deep level in the consciousness of the human population on the planet. I mean, or maybe I'm wrong in that, but it seems to me the confidence of the people, there's great distrust between the various political and economic forces between them, like a Democrat and Republican and all that, and their comparable things, the Brexit and these kind of things, and the disquietude of what's going on and expressions of discontent by the population writ large, don't you think? Maybe it has to do with the failure that came out of 2008 that you put such attention upon as a major thing, like earlier people had put such great attention on the Great Depression of 1930s.
One thing When I asked you earlier on if you thought perhaps this was all a setup and the crash of 2008 was actually purpose-filled.
Well, some people might have tried to engineer it that way,
And when
they would have benefited.
when the smoke and the glare and the bad fumes all of a sudden dissipate, you see it clear for a moment. What came out of 2008?
Well, you've paid a great deal of attention to it. How do you see it?
I saw it as a joke,
As a joke.
in the sense,
You-
and the
okay.
joke's on us.
Us being the mass of the people,
Yeah.
as opposed to the leadership.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, okay. So the mass discontent is legitimate in terms of the lack of the quality of the leadership that is asserting itself.
When 2008,
Big charge.
when 2008 hit, you had banks crashing right, big banks
Lehman,
crashing right, left, and
yeah,
center.
right.
Washington Mutual, the
You had
largest
the
of the
savings and
mortgage
loans
holders.
before that. Remember, savings and loan.
And when you
before
saw all the dust settle, and
Yeah.
you saw the names of the banks
that. Yeah,
that had bought the other banks that died
yeah.
or were dying,
Walmots, yeah.
and I looked at myself and says, "This is worse than ever," because what you did was concentrate the financial banking power into fewer hands.
And decrease the need for them to have good paperwork or something that would support their ownership stake or their position even, that they had to manufacture almost out of whole cloth with cyber things and things like that. It was pretty disruptive.
Oh,
and
don't worry
disrupted
about the
life.
don't
Yeah.
worry about the lost documents. We'll just write a new one.
Right,
hello.
that kind of attitude, yeah. And anything to protect the interest of the already well-to-do.
So, but you see, with a smaller number
That's
of banks
dangerous.
that are even wealthier than ever before,
Yeah, there's a few, yeah.
you have fewer people making the real big decisions that affect everybody globally.
You think it's a smaller group? It's getting more
Sure.
concentrated in a few hands, yeah?
But
okay,
they
that's
all
dangerous, yeah.
They all pat each other's backs. They all know who the players are.
Yeah, and they change, I suppose.
And so you have to ask yourself, is this just an accident, or was
Yeah.
this contrived?
Yeah,
Now, when you see the systematic tearing down of one thing for the success of another, you have to ask yourself, where are the powers that be that allow this to happen? For instance,
or where is the intellectual leadership, or even the political leadership,
when
that
I
can
walk,
deal with an altered situation that calls for new and creative thinking that is lacking? Yeah.
when I walk around the city of Manhattan, New York, which is where I live, and I've lived here in Manhattan 37 years, and I've watched the retail stores come and go, the restaurants come and go,
Yeah.
and
The drones are coming now.
with
and,
the
yeah.
exception of in 1970s when I first came here and New York was in such a bad situation,
Yeah.
I hadn't seen so many empty stores.
You mean, was that coming from California
Yeah,
to New York?
To New
yeah.
York.
Yeah.
and that was just about when New York was going to go into bankruptcy.
Yeah, to New York, dropped dead. Remember the
But
headline?
now,
yeah. Wanting a loan, yeah.
when you see a phenomena that's happened, and it's extraordinary, the changes it's made in the way people operate, and that is to your retail store on the street
Yeah.
versus your e-commerce.
Yeah, it's coming even more rapidly all the time. Yeah, the pace of change is coming, more rapidly. The pace is as well as the
It's not
actual-
even the pace. It's how do I describe it?
potential.
Again, it's more concentration in the hands of few.
You think it's becoming more concentrated in the hands of
Very
few.
much so. When you look
Yeah.
at Amazon and its extraordinary growth
Yeah.
and how it has taken out retail,
Yeah.
You know, the joke here in New York was, you know, every block had a bookstore in New York.
Yeah.
And then all the bookstores went out.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was being, your books were on book pads, or you ordered a hardcover book or a paperback book through Amazon.com.
You could order anything through Amazon.
Now you can.
Yeah, anything. They'll deliver anything.
So
and the drones are coming soon. They'll be coming soon. Drones to deliver it to your door.
So,
You'll need milk chutes to get the stuff inside.
and the venerable Barnes & Noble, when it went down, it's, you know, closed its last store, you know, we all were crying. And now Amazon, who
Bezos, yeah. Uh-huh.
Barnes & Nobles, is now building its first bookstore here in one of the places where
Is that
Barnes
really true? Yeah.
Yeah, up by
Okay. What
Lincoln
does that
Center.
tell us? Is that a renaissance of something, or what?
that people still like to go and see and touch what they buy before it's shipped to them.
You think that's coming in now, right? Okay. 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 That's interesting. Yeah.
You know, back in the old days, it was always market day was the big day of the week.
Oh well, out in the town, yeah.
Out in the township, people brought their animals, their wares, their foods, their
Yeah,
such.
right out of the garden, yeah.
Retail stores.
Uh-huh.
How many times have I heard exhausted ladies in the subway with bags after bags after bags saying, "That was a great day of shopping. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I'm shopped out."
Yeah. Well,
But so they don't get that social interchange of stores and walk-ins and such like they used to, when all they have to do is, you know, dial it on your.
and yet the ability to have all those things done by extension of robots and things like that is growing exponentially all over the place. So that's part of an inexorable movement within the society that's
Mhm.
going to bring even more disquietude to the
Sure.
patterns that your people are used to. Yeah.
Macy's,
Macy's all closing, aren't they? Across the country?
all across the country,
Yeah.
they shut down their retail stores.
Yeah.
J.C. Penney's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
The retailers, they can't compete.
So what's the reason for? Maybe it's not. Maybe there's always been discontent among some and everything, but this idea of an inordinately deep and widespread sense of general and large-ranging discontent among so many people of all political persuasions. What is the source of it, and what is the implication of it, and what is the likely outcome over the next 5-10 years or so, if this is the case?
Well, personally for myself,
Yeah.
I just watch all this change coming at
You
me.
just wonder, yeah.
And I'm what, you know, I'm the
They used to have a thing, stop the world, I want to get off. You know, maybe that's the sort of attitude. Yeah,
Every
but-
time I go to my computer in the morning, it's like they just changed the format of my Google page.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Now I have to figure out, you know, how to work this one. Or a person the other day showed me.
but what about the question
No,
of
Fritz.
justice? Oh, go ahead, go
Fritz,
ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
You
Yeah.
know, expanding on that one thought.
Yeah, right.
As I was talking about how somebody would go into the city for a big day of shopping, you know, and go home exhausted, et cetera, et cetera. They're walking, they're sharing, they're smelling, they're bumping, they're arguing, they're buying, they're kvetching, they're looking. And they go home with their prizes at the night. Now with going into the computer on e-commerce, they say, oh, it's so easy, you just this, that, put in your credit card, and they'll ship it to you. Now they ship things for free because it's so competitive. And I
Right,
says,
Margaret
that's
works
fine.
That way, yeah.
I don't know how many times you have to ship something back because you don't want it out now that you've seen it up front.
Well, that's another issue, yeah, but yeah. Okay, that's
And
a
so-
thought, yeah.
In this sort of the same analogy, a friend of mine took me to an apartment building where she thought I would be interested in living. 3 towers on the promenade there in New Jersey, right across from New York City. And she said, everything is here.
What?
You have your gym.
Mm.
There's restaurants downstairs, the dry cleaners,
Never
there's the
have to
grocery
leave the
stores,
building.
the pharmacy. He says,
Yeah.
you never have to
Yeah,
leave the
right,
building.
right, yeah.
There's rec rooms, there's places where you can meet people. Oh, it's wonderful to meet people in the elevator. That's where you always meet people in the elevator, going up and going down. And I said, you mean you don't even have to go outside? He says, no, everything is right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking myself, well, particularly myself, who has adventured so many places in the world.
You've been all over the world, I know.
And I'm asking myself, you would want to stay in one place and just have everything spoon-fed to you and not go out and, interchange
Explore,
with the world and explore?
Yeah.
And it's gotten so easy where you really don't have to leave your house unless you have a job. And then if you have a job, you could have it at home.
The jobs are being threatened by all the robotization that's coming. The jobs are going to be done by robots, and people are not going to be needed as workers in a productive process in seriously large terms. That's another major thing that's confronting the planet. Might have part of the reason why people are upset. The pattern for the future is not adequately able to say it's going to be okay, because it could be very, very disruptive, like 2005, over and over and over again, and maybe people sense that, and it's why there is this sense of disquietude that they don't have the system down yet that this future requires, something along those lines. I don't know.
Harold, I was watching a commercial for a pizza. A brand of pizza. They said, and we have drones to deliver your pizza.
Did they use the term drone?
Right, and
well, wait a minute, that's really interesting.
No,
yeah.
And apparently,
you gotta have a place for a drone to park.
No,
or
right to your doorstep.
No, they got to have milk chutes. They used to have milk chutes.
No.
Okay, that's a thing on the outside. You put the thing in, you close it, and in the inside there's a thing. They're going to have to retrofit buildings to have the drones accommodated to deliver all
but
this
this
stuff.
Pizza, but this
Amazon.
This pizza man was a big chain, and this was an experiment that they were doing. Rather than having delivery boys, they now were investing in drones to develop the pizza.
It's coming, yeah.
But you had to live within 3 miles of the pizza parlor.
Well, that would be a limitation. It'll be overcome with time, yeah.
With time.
They'll deliver across the cloud. No, go ahead, yeah.
But can you imagine trying to argue with the drone that the pizza is cold because it took too long to get there?
Well, these are little things you have to worry about, but those drones are going to take away the job of a delivery person who used to make a living getting paid a wage in order to have ability to buy stuff, and they're going to take away the ability for people to get the money called a wage for their work in order to be able to buy the things that can be produced.
Harold, how many people do you think got knocked off when Macy's shut down hundreds of stores?
Many, hundreds, thousands, yeah.
The whole vertical industry, from delivery, from drivers to clerks to maintenance to your
floor walkers,
to your buyers.
Macy's still there on 34th Street. I don't know for how long, but
each one of those stores was the whole.
Yeah, it's like we had Hudson's in Detroit. That was Detroit. Every other town had their own. But again,
now Amazon is challenging. What's that stationer that we go to around the corner?
I don't know. You mean
where you buy paper supplies and things like that?
Staples, yeah.
It's challenging Staples. It's Amazon's challenging everything.
Yeah. Now, is this so you think there's
and they don't have to pay the real estate burden of a retail shop.
So what's the overall? We only got a couple of minutes left and everything, but what's the overall prospect and what's the overall? Is it correct to think this thing? I keep bringing it up. A sense of disquietude that's abroad in the land and the world. And is it the lack of, there's something big going on here and you don't know what it is, Mr. Jones. I think that was a song that was it Bobby Dylan had a song like that, or one of the rock groups and everything. And there's something going on that is very, very transformative and manageable in any traditional terms, and that's why there's such a degree of upset. And you read some of that in your book when you looked at what happened in 2005. It might be a result.
2008.
2008 particularly, yeah.
But Harold, now
the economics are not in order for what's needed.
But now it's like smoke and mirrors on a bowl of Jell-O.
Smoke and mirrors on a bowl of Jell-O. Oh, you got a television commercial coming up. Yeah. Get the cameras rolling, yeah?
For instance, I cannot fathom what the president is doing.
Oh no, I can't either. It's just a.
I can't.
It's a series
and there's more scandals and more potential problems in the last 4 months since he's been in office.
Yeah, it's picking up, isn't it? I don't know. Is there going to be an impeachment or something? You know.
And I ask myself, where's the government going? What is it doing?
Well, keep looking, and you get in your tweet. There will be a tweet that will make it clear to you, you know. But it is. There's serious disquietude abroad.
And one thing's
across the world, actually.
I don't know.
The United States is a powerful country to have somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
And
or maybe they know what they're doing. They claim they know what they're doing, and we just don't understand. That would be some people thinking that way.
Or they'll confuse us so much and do exactly what they had planned on doing, and we're going to be there with egg on our face.
Yeah.
Or twiddling our thumbs and out of a job and out of a home.
Back in 2008, you read a book. What book would you recommend to understand what's going on here? And what's the year now? 2007 or 2017. Where do we go to get some understanding to make this transition a little bit easier, personally or collectively, or maybe within the realm of our community and that sort of thing? Who's making some sense out of this best, either in the written or electronic media, or academia for that matter, or politically even for that matter?
I wish Doonesbury would come back.
Doonesbury, yes. Yeah.
We would have, I think, a more correct commentary than some of our very beautiful newscasters that are on the network televisions.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah.
And
but what book? You had that. What was that book? That was called the Great Crash of 2008 or something. And
no, The Long Short.
The Long Short. That was read by many.
Short.
And then there were other people who were writing on that subject too. Who are the writers that are writing in a major way now, do you think? I've only got a minute left, so
I
got
don't
any
know.
quick leads on that?
I don't know.
Or what are you reading now to give you a sense of quietude in this realm of vast in disquietude all over the world?
Well,
only a matter of a few seconds. Quickly now.
Oh, who's that fellow that predicted things?
Nostradamus.
No. I would like to have a Nostradamus. Edgar
Cayce or something else. Okay, never mind from the peanut gallery, please. You know,
I'd like to have somebody predict something, but what we have is smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors. Thank you very much. That was your pleasure, Maggie Borges. Thanks a lot. Thank you for viewing. We'll come back tomorrow. Thanks a lot, Josie Ann. Okay, that's it. You know. Okay, so we did get in.